long way. And we left Vrndavan to come to the desert of Rajasthan. Why have we done that? To have darshan of Sri Radha Madanmohan ji. Srila Prabhupada taught us that Krishna never leaves Vrndavan, right? But here he is. So what does that mean? This is not different. The spiritual world is also here. Now we have Hindi translator doing his job back there. Yeah, no, Hindi. Is that your assignment again?
Can you bring me to Hindi translation language?
Are you ready? When Srila Prabhupada established the corporate document for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, there's in United States law for forming a corporation, you have to state the purposes that that organization will fulfill or try to fulfill. And the first one on the list is to establish places of pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, please consider, how can an organization establish places of pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Either they are or they aren't. But how do you establish places of pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? If you listen very carefully to the description of Sri Radha Madanmohan, then you'll understand how specifically, in this particular deity's case, many pastimes were performed. Many amazing and very sweet pastimes of Madan Mohan were established in each of the places where he was worshipped. Some of the devotees with us were not with us when we visited Madan Mohan temple, and so I'm going to describe once again the history of the Madan Mohan deity and add additional history from the time the deity was moved here to Karouli. Madan Mohan was one of the original deities installed by Vrndavan, the great grandson of Krishna. Madan Mohan represents the deity who oversees or is in charge of knowledge of one's relationship with the personality of Godhead. Sambandha Gyan. Moreover, through the worship of Madan Mohan, one is given the facility to establish one's relationship with the personality of Godhead. So, hopefully, we'll finish this discussion and be able to go back again before Madan Mohan and offer our prayers to him that he very kindly help us in these intimately related areas to nurture our proper understanding of our relationship, then the relationship of all things with the personality of Godhead, and to assist us in entering into that relationship. So from the time of the great grandson of Vajranabh, this means during the reign of Maharaj Parikshit, Madan Mohan was worshipped for some untold amount of time. But in due course of time, as we find time has this way of destroying even good things, at least apparently. And so the worship of Madan Mohan was forgotten. It's hard to imagine how that happened, but somehow that happened. And before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, Advaita Acarya came to visit in Vrndavan, because Advaita Acarya was a great devotee of Krishna. And while Advaita Acarya was living in Vrndavan, he stayed at the bottom of that Dvadasaditya Tila, the hill upon which Madan Mohan temple rests, under a tree that is now known as Advaita Vat. And while he was there, he discovered, buried underneath the ground, the deity of Madan Mohan. And he personally worshipped the deity of Madan Mohan, Advaita Acarya. After some time, he wanted to return to Navadvip in anticipation of the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he entrusted the worship of Madan Mohan to a Brahmin named Purushottam Chobe. And the Brahmin was a very, very fortunate person and a very elevated person, because it certainly seems that Madan Mohan chooses to be worshipped by very elevated personalities. And so he was worshipping until the time that Sanatana Goswami came. And Sanatana Goswami was staying under a different tree every night during this time of Sanatana Goswami's life in Vrndavan. As we know from Chaitanya Charitamrita, he had already given up all sense of personal wealth, all sense of proprietorship, all sense of material comfort. You recall the narration of his brother-in-law had given him one very new and attractive chadar, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, without saying a word, just with his eyes, he gave the indication to Sanatana Goswami he didn't approve. If you're on the path of renunciation, don't hold on to some material opulence. So Sanatana Goswami gave up that very nice chadar and accepted instead a torn quilt that was being worn by a Bengali Vaishnava on the bank of a river, spread out under the sun to dry. The understanding is he had renounced all things of this world, including living in Vrndavan, having no fixed residence, living under a different tree every night. And as he was traveling through Vrndavan, he would perform madhukari to sustain himself. One of the wealthiest persons in India, now performing madhukari in Braja. And the purpose of madhukari, for those that are performing madhukari in the proper consciousness, it's not, this is my means for maintenance, but rather, this is a way to engage worldly persons in making some small sacrifice so that it will help them in their spiritual advancement. That's the right consciousness of a renounced person paying visits to the homes of worldly-minded persons. So one day, when Sanatana Goswami was visiting in the vicinity of the residence of Purushottam Chobe, Purushottam Chobe, the night before, had a dream that one sadhu will come to visit your home tomorrow morning, and I want to be worshipped by that sadhu. So you please give this deity, you see how large the deity is, it's just astonishing. Please give me to him so that he can worship me. When Sanatana Goswami came to Purushottam Chobe's home, and he heard that this is the wish of Madan Gopal. By the way, when you read Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which was written by Sanatana Goswami, you find that the deity that that is identified as the deity, the worshipable deity in part 2 is Madan Gopal. So Madan Mohan and Madan Gopal are the same name of the same deity, or different names of the same deity. Gopakumar's mantra was the Madan Gopal mantra, worshipping Madan Mohan. So Sanatana Goswami's response was, what a difficult situation. The deity has indicated to you that he wants me to worship him, but how can I worship him? I'm a renunciate. I don't have anything to offer him. I don't have a place to have him stay. How can I accept his service? I'm sorry, I can't accept this service. And he left the home. But he was conflicted in his heart, feeling, how can I say no to Madan Gopal? So he came back the next morning and said, I have to accept the desire of Madan Gopal, but what service can I do? I can place him on a branch of a tree, and that can be his home, because I just live under different trees. And I don't have any wealth, so he'll have to accept whatever it is that I have to offer, because I have nothing. Whatever comes from Madhukari, that's all I have. Now there are different versions of this story. One version is Madan Gopal spoke and said, that's all right, you just offer whatever you have, I'll be happy. So he brought Madan Gopal to Dwadasya Aditya Tila, the place where the Madan Mohan temple is, and stayed there for some time. It certainly restricted his moving about, because you can't carry a deity that size with you as you move about. So, from a branch of a tree at the top of Dwadasya Tila, Sanatana Goswami worshipped Madanmohan. Sometimes when he would perform Madhukari, he would be given some wheat or wheat flour. And a very simple practice of making wheat, cooked wheat, is take the wheat mixed with Jamuna water, make it into a soft dough, put the dough in a shape of a ball, place the ball on the hot coals of the fire, and that way the wheat becomes cooked, and then those, they have a name for it in Vraja, those were offered to Madanmohan. So just around the corner, as we go out from the way we came in and make a left, there's a little Jagannath temple, and just past that another looks like deity Madanmohan. And that same picture of Sanatana Goswami sitting and offering to his Madanmohan deity whatever little he had, and the exchange from the deity saying, "This is okay, but can't you add a little salt?" And Sanatana Goswami responded saying, "I told you I don't have anything. I only have whatever is supplied, and I'm giving you the best I have. What can I do? I shouldn't be worshipping you to begin with, but it's your idea." All right, that's okay. Whatever you have. Very intimate. Who can imagine the intimacy of that worship? As fate would have it, Madanmohan's desire to have a little salt was fulfilled in the following way. One very wealthy merchant was traveling from Delhi to Agra on the Jamuna River with a whole boatload of salt. And as the boat was passing down the Jamuna, it got stuck on a sand dune or sand bar going out into the river. And whatever it was, he tried to get the boat free, nothing worked. And so, I'll describe this slightly differently than I did before. Madanmohan personally assumed the form of a little village boy and saw Ramdas Kapoor struggling to get his boat free, and he said, "I know one sadhu who lives up on the hill up there, and I bet if you go to speak with him, he'll give some blessing whereby your boat can become freed and your purpose can be fulfilled." So Ramdas Kapoor, being a very pious man, thought that was a nice idea. I'm not able to free the boat, whatever I try. So he came to where Sanatana Goswami was residing, and immediately just being in the presence of Sanatana Goswami, he could understand what a saintly person, a pure soul. So immediately his respect went to Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami asked what had brought him. He said, "One small boy said I should come and see you because I have this difficulty, my boat won't move." And Sanatana Goswami said that if you simply worship Madanmohan, then I am sure that all of your most elevated desires in life will be fulfilled. And that went deep into the heart of the salt merchant. And he was very thankful and said that he would like to make some small offering. But he didn't have anything with him but a little pouch that had some salt in it. So he offered the salt to Madan Mohan. Small little offering, but with genuine appreciation for Sanatana Goswami and the purity of his words of worshipping Madan Mohan. And sure enough, when he went back to his boat, mysteriously the boat became very easily to moved from the sandbar, and he went to Agra and sold all of the wares in his boat. But this impression of Sanatana Goswami was still very strong within his mind. So he wanted to go back and again see Sanatana Goswami. He decided in the course of the journey that he wanted to give everything that had come from the sale of his goods and place it at Sanatana Goswami's feet. All that wealth. Sanatana Goswami said, "What do I need of wealth? I've given up all wealth. But one thing, if you really wish to do some service, you can build a nice temple for Madan Mohan." And so the first of the 6 Goswami temples was built by that same Ramdas Kapoor. Beautiful architecture, landmark for the whole of Vrndavan. And there Madan Mohan was worshipped for some time. While Sanatana Goswami was worshipping the deity, still during the time of the 6 Goswamis, the son of King Prataparudra, who was King Prataparudra? He was the king of Utkal, the whole area of South India in which Jagannath Puri was residing. His son, Purushottam Jena, desired very much to manifest or to provide, to render a service to Madan Mohan and Govindaji by providing them with Radha by the side of Madan Mohan and Govindaji. So he took up that service. He had the deities of Radha made for each of them, and a grand ceremony was created for a procession to go all the way from Puri and to bring those 2 deities to Govindaji and Madan Mohan. This is very important. When you again go and see the deities in the temple room, you can think of this particular episode. The deity of Radha, who was by the side of Madan Mohan, appeared in the dream of the Madan Mohan Pujari and said, "This Radha that is by the side of Madan Mohan, this is correct. But the other Radha that was brought and installed by the side of Govindaji, that's not Radha. That's Lalita. And Lalita should be installed on the other side of Madan Mohan, just on the other side of me. Can you please make that arrangement?" So in the morning, the Pujari informed Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, and because of the elevated and respected nature of this Pujari, everyone just accepted. This is the desire of Madan Mohan. This is the desire of Srimati Radharani. So they moved the deity that was by the side of Radha Govindaji and installed her by Madan Mohan's right side. So Radha, Madan Mohan, and Lalita. when you see on the central altar here. These are the original deities worshipped by Sanatana Goswami. The altar to our left, the local pujaris are telling us this is Radha Gopal, and apparently Lalita. The main deity that we've come to see is in the central altar, Radha Madanmohan. So over the generations, from Sanatana Goswami's time, the deity of Radha, Madanmohan and Lalita were worshipped for around 100-120 years. At about 1570, Aurangzeb, very unpleasant king, whose capital was in Agra, had made a decision that he wanted to destroy the temples in Vrndavan. So he sent his soldiers to Vrndavan to destroy the deities and destroy the temples. Understanding that, the king of Jaipur, Jai Singh, sent his soldiers to go rescue the deities. And the deities, the principal deities of Vrndavan, were taken secretly out of Vrndavan and in the direction of Rajasthan to Kamyavan, and then they crossed, as we did, we crossed the border of UP into Rajasthan and brought them to Jaipur and established temples for them. So this continued for some time. The principal deities, Madan Mohan, Govindaji, Gopinath, Radha Damodar, Radha Madhava, Radha Vinod, Radha Gokulananda. The deities were brought here. The deities that we saw when we were in Vrndavan, they are pratibhu deities or replacement deities of the originals. Now, a very wonderful pastime of Radha Madanmohan took place when the daughter of the king of Jaipur, some generations later, was requested, her hand in marriage was requested by the king of Karouli for his son. When you look at the altar, you see many beautiful paintings of Radha Krishna Leela. Look closely when you go out again, on the wall, inside the temple area, up on the ceiling. Some beautiful, 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 beautiful Radha Krishna. Some Ram Leela also, paintings. And way over to the right side as you're facing the altar is a portrait of Raj Govinda Singh. Raj Govinda Singh. He was the prince who was to marry the princess of Jaipur. So, when the request was made for the princess to marry the Raj Govind Singh, she stated to her father, I will go on one condition, that Madan Mohan comes with me. And the father said, forget it, and there's no marriage. Madan Mohan is not going to leave Jaipur. And so the messenger was sent back to Karouli with that word, he's not coming. The deity's not coming, and so the marriage proposal is called off. What to do? Another dilemma in Krishna consciousness. That night, the king of Jaipur had a dream. Madanmohan appeared in his dream and said, I want to go to Karouli and be worshipped there. Please say yes. So once again, how could the king say no to Madanmohan? But how could he say yes? Because he was also, as his daughter was, very attached to Madanmohan. But he had to submit to the will of Madanmohan, and so a message was sent back to the king of Karouli, the marriage is on. And we'll have a grand procession for Madanmohan to leave Jaipur and come here to Karouli. So big historic event, grand procession, and this beautiful temple was established for Madanmohan, and since that time he's been worshipped here. Sometimes they dress the deity in very interesting ways, not quite like at Radha Gopinath temple where every day there's something different, but perhaps you've seen a picture, and I'll see if I can make a copy of that picture available along with another picture or two that I promised to Ashish, so we can send it out to all of you. A picture of Madanmohan where he's dressed. Radha and Madanmohan are dressed in Kshatriya outfits. And there's a nice pastime connected with that. So, coming here to Karouli, intimately expressing his desire at different times over a period of time, how he would like to be worshipped and who he would like to worship him. Madanmohan is a very, as I said at the very beginning, very sweet and confidential deity. The name Madanmohan means that he is the attractor of Cupid. Sometimes Cupid is called Kandarpa, sometimes he's called Madan, because he attracts the mind. He's captivated the mind of all living beings in the material world. The attraction of enjoyment in conjugal relation between man and woman keeps the world going round, keeps species procreating and generating more and more, and the God of love has everyone very busy in this material world. But once, when attempting to attract the personality of Godhead, his flower arrow wilted just upon seeing, when he saw the all-attractive form of the personality of Godhead. Cupid himself became charmed, and his bow slipped from his hand. His flower arrow fell to the ground, completely amazed at the beauty of the personality of Godhead. So the Lord is called Madanmohan. And in establishing our relationship with the personality of Godhead through the kindness of Madanmohan, he does these two things simultaneously. He attracts our heart by his transcendental charm and beauty and wonderful transcendental qualities of his loving nature. At the same time, he takes away from our heart all the so-called attraction of material affairs and material relationships and material happiness through them. In order to establish our relationship with the personality of Godhead, this detachment from worldly pleasure must take place. Because otherwise the two are completely dissonant. Prabhupada describes it's like trying to light a fire and pouring water on the fire. If you want to light a fire, you don't pour water on it. So if you want the fire of loving attraction and devotion to the personality of Godhead to increase, then one must purposefully, deliberately diminish the attraction for material pleasure and material happiness, especially this idea of happiness through the conjugal attraction of man and woman's exchange. This is the feature of illusion. When the princess of Karouli spoke about having Madanmohan come with her, her statement was, this affair of king and queen is illusion. It's born of illusion, and it's only temporary. But the eternal relation with Madanmohan, that will be with me always. I want him to come with me, and that is my real shelter. So if we want to establish, we're here at, we've great endeavor, we're here. We've come a long distance to come to Karouli, and not just to have darshan of Madanmohan, certainly to have darshan of Madanmohan, but at his feet to offer our prayers that our attraction may go to him, our shelter may be found in him, and that he very kindly help us to establish our relationship with him, to very clearly understand the relationship of all things with the personality of Godhead. Since they're all from him, they're meant for his service, not for our service or our enjoyment. Madanmohan, please help us fill our hearts with this proper understanding, and let our attraction for our relationship with you be made stronger. Let it become established as a fixed and irrevocable feature of our life. Very, very powerful deity, very charming and attractive pastimes. Madanmohan is performed with many different devotees. Let that charm, attractiveness, and drawing us to him also take place from this visit here to Sri Radha Madanmohan Mandir in Karouli. Sri Radha Madanmohan Ji ki jai. At least physically we made it. This is Sri Radha Madhava, the deities that were personally worshipped by Srila Jayadev Goswami. Jayadev Goswami's deities, Radha Madhava, were amongst the deities that Jai Singh brought from Vrndavan, along with Madan Mohan and Radha Gopinath and Radha Govinda, Radha Madhava were also brought here. And the temple over here is a temple that was built by the sister of Jai Singh. So a very devotional family filled with Krishna bhakti. Before she was married, the temple was built, and then this temple was also established for Radha Madhava. And Jayadev Goswami, a little bit about Jayadev Goswami's life. He lived about 300 years prior to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that he, Jayadev Goswami, along with Chandidas and Vidyapati, wrote very, very, very beautiful, very confidential descriptions of Radha Krishna pastimes. In fact, so confidential that unless one is on a platform where you no longer have any material desires or any material attractions, best you postpone reading the writings of Jayadev Goswami, because they're very, very confidential. When the songbook was being prepared very early in our movement, some songs of Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govind were placed there, and Prabhupada instructed that they be removed, because our devotees are not qualified to understand and properly appreciate the level of intimacy of Radha and Krishna's pastimes that are described there. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would hear from them regularly in Gambhira, recited by Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy in a confidential way. Prabhupada described that the Antya Leela portion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life was spent in intense moods of love in separation from Krishna. And during the daytime, Mahaprabhu would engage in congregational chanting. In the nighttime, he would sit in Gambhira or some secluded place with just these two, Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy. And as his mood of love for Krishna would reach heights unseen, unknown before, Swarup Damodar would sing various songs to complement those moods, specifically according to the feelings of love that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was experiencing. Jayadev Goswami, although he appeared 300 years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his love for Krishna was so strong that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed his personal form to Jayadev Goswami and explained that these writings that you are preparing will be enjoyed personally by me when I later make my appearance as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these very, very elevated Vaishnavas were empowered to prepare the way, so to speak, for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. A little about Jayadev Goswami's life. The part that's best known is his early life in the Yeah, the 12th century. So the late 1100s. He appeared in West Bengal, and from childhood he was an amazing scholar, and very eagerly he studied the scriptures. Particularly he was attracted to the devotional scriptures, and his Krishna bhakti was evidenced even as a young man. He traveled to Jagannath Puri, where he married his wife Padmavati, and there in Jagannath Puri he wrote Gita Govind. Gita Govind is a description of very, very, very wonderful pastimes of exchange of love between Radha and Krishna. There's one passage, particularly well-known episode in Jayadev Goswami's writing of Gita Govind, as he was describing the exchange of love between Radha and Krishna, and Radha was in her Man Leela, exhibiting anger towards Krishna. Krishna tried and pleaded, and even he was crying, to appeal to Radha to leave behind her anger. And he was contemplating a particular verse where Krishna would then place his crown upon the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani to appease her. But as he was writing this verse, he felt some conflict inside. Inspiration said, this isn't right. How can I depict the personality of Godhead, who is the supreme controller, placing himself in such a way at the feet of Radharani, placing his head on her feet? He was disturbed. So he set his writing instrument down, and he went to take his midday bath. Shortly after he went to take his midday bath, Krishna, looking exactly like Jayadev Goswami, came walking right into the house while his wife was preparing lunch to be offered to the deity. While she was finishing, she was surprised that he came back so quickly, but so she hurried and completed the meal and made the offering to the Shalagram Shila that you see inside on the altar. And Jayadev, or Krishna disguised as Jayadev, went down to the place where he was writing, picked up the writing instrument, and completed Gita Govind in exactly the same language as Jayadev was contemplating. Then he put the writing instrument down, and his wife served him his lunch, and immediately disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. So then Padmavati took her lunch, because the practice for a Vedic housewife was that she would only eat after her husband had eaten. So here comes Jayadev Goswami into his home and sees his wife sitting and having lunch, and thought, Padmavati, what are you doing? This is not our practice. You would serve me first. She was very bewildered. She said, well, I did serve you first, and you finished your meal, and I don't know why you're speaking this way to me. Are you joking? Are you teasing? So Jayadev asked her to describe everything that happened in his absence. Well, you came in and you went right to your writing table and you sat down, and so Jayadev went to the table and saw very distinctly written the very verse that he had been contemplating. So he could understand at once that it was Krishna. And he exclaimed, "My dear wife, how fortunate you are. You have had the direct association of the personality of Godhead, Krishna himself." He fell at her feet and was exclaiming how her virtue, her fortune, how wonderful it was. Suddenly Padmavati could understand that Krishna had come to complete this verse in Gita Govind, that Jayadev was feeling reluctant. Krishna liked very much this mood of submitting to the love of Srimati Radharani. Even her love was in the mood of anger. It's simply a transcendental variety of ecstasy in the exchanges of Radha and Krishna, conjugal love. In that Gita Govind, we find one song that we sing every day. The Shringa prayer that we sing every day is part of the Dasavatar Stotras, which are part of Gita Govind. So how intimate is Jayadev Goswami to our practice? When we were up here speaking with the Pujari, I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was speaking in Hindi, but it was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. That much I could understand. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu he said it 3 times. He's Krishna himself. So Jayadev was 300 years before Lord Chaitanya. But at least the Pujari understands in this way. Some conflict arose. There's at least one narration about Jayadev Goswami. His Gita Govind made him so popular in Jagannath Puri that the king at the time became very envious. He's become more popular than me. And he considered himself to be a great poet, and so he wrote Avir Bhav Gita Govind. Eclipsing, his intention was to surpass Jayadev Goswami. So we know how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt about those that want to surpass a great Acharya. This is not the mood of a great soul. Even if one is superior, one does not want to place oneself in that way superior. So he told his minister, print many books and circulate them, so I'll become more popular than Jayadev. And through passage of time, a big controversy arose. The pundits refused even to make copies or to receive copies, and the king was very competitive and he still wanted to go forward. And so the ministers made a suggested solution. Their suggestion was they would place the copy of Gita Govind and the king's copy of Avirbhav Gita Govind before the Jagannath deity at night, and then in the morning Jagannath would reveal something. Which one was the superior one? They found the next morning when the deities were awoken that Jagannath was on his arm was Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govind, and the other copy was torn and strewn all over the temple floor, the altar floor. So it was pretty conclusive. Jayadev Goswami ki jai. But Jayadev Goswami was very disturbed by the mood of this king. So he left Jagannath Puri And he came to a place, those that have been to Mayapur, Navadvip Dham, may remember. If you're walking or riding in a car heading for the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, off on the left there's a very wide open field before you reach the Ganges, and you can see a little flag on top of a temple. It's a place where Jayadev Goswami was residing, right near the banks of the Ganga, with his wife Padmavati. So already the reputation of Jayadev Goswami was well known. And continuing down the road further was the palace of Lakshman Sen. The Sen dynasty, or Sen dynasty, was many generations long, and they were very elevated Vaishnavas. They protected Vaishnav culture in the Navadvip area. Again, this is 300 years before Lord Chaitanya. So Jayadev then was visited by Lakshman Sen and his royal entourage. They came to the ashram of Jayadev Goswami, and in a very humble way, Lakshman Sen prostrated himself before Jayadev Goswami and made the request, rather than staying here in this simple cottage, would it be something you would consider that you can come and become the chief priest and pandit in my kingdom? I would be very much pleased if you would accept that position. Jayadev Goswami became very angry and said, I've been deeply offended. I'll have nothing to do with worldly-minded people, persons that are simply engaged in worldly affairs and gathering money and exhibiting their power in various ways. I'm leaving your kingdom at once. Lakshman Sen was mortified, but he didn't become indignant like a proud personality. Rather, he said, I can understand your position, although you're yourself a householder, you're on the topmost platform of pure devotional service. Your love for Krishna is not obstructed by any such things as all of the affairs. And it's true, a king has to deal with so many material affairs in order to give protection for the citizens in the kingdom. But if you leave my kingdom now, how unfortunate it will be for myself and all of the citizens, because I've come and offended you in this way. May I make a suggestion? If you just go on the other side of the Ganges, perhaps you can make your residence there. In this way, your vow will be upheld, but at the same time, we can have your proximity and benefit in that way. So Jayadev smiled and said, I was just testing you. A proud king is a person I would not want to have anything to do with. But you've shown me the true quality of a devotee by your humility. And so I will accept your offer. He crossed the Ganga, and as you recall, those of us that visited Champahati, it's on the other side of the Ganga. We visited there by taking a boat ride on the other side of the Ganga, and Jayadev Goswami made his residence in a champak grove. Champak trees are produce very fragrant flowers, and they're golden in color. And this Champahati is also connected to Champakalata, one of the main 8 gopis of Krishna in his Krishna Leela. So while residing there in Champahati, Jayadev Goswami continued with his contribution to the world of writing beautiful, beautiful poetic expressions of love and devotion for Krishna. And it was at that particular location that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made his appearance before him, being so pleased with his pure love for Krishna, and expressed himself as I already described. Now, after some time, he became very attached to residing in Champahati, but some indication was given to him that he should return to Jagannath Puri. There was some further service for him there. So very reluctantly he left Navadvip and returned to Puri and stayed for some time. There's not biographical information of what time he spent in Vrndavan, but apparently he spent time in Vrndavan and worshipped these Radha Madhava deities. By his feet is a very large Shalagram Shila. The Pujari says the Shila has a chakra, or Sudarshan Shila mark. And these deities were brought here to Jaipur by Jai Singh along with the other deities, and we'll tell that detailed story tomorrow when we're at Govindaji Temple. Now, I'm a little concerned about time for 2 reasons. One is they close the gate at 7:30 here, and the other is I know you all must be hungry and lunch is waiting. And that may take some time. We have to walk about 5 minutes to get to where lunch is, and then take prasadam and wash and come back and get on the bus. And so I think I'll stop at this point. I was thinking if we had gotten here earlier, we could spend some time discussing about the places that we would go tomorrow. Let's see what time we finish prasadam and how all that ends up, and we'll see how it goes. But a very nice place, very peaceful, very beautiful. Nice. In the back here is a nice garden, and this other temple, and okay. So we'll try to stay together. I know it's an austerity to stay together, but we'll try to stay together. And I've not been to this place, but Dharmendra, you've been to this place? Where we're going to take prasadam? Ashish has been to the place? Okay, so he'll lead us to prasadam. Stay together, everybody, because I don't know where it is. If you get lost, it's the Mahadev temple. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jayadev Goswami ki jai.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare Hare.
Our final day, final half day of our yatra. And we find ourselves in the presence of a very merciful deity. Sri Radha Madanmohan. the pujari is a very, very wonderful devotee. He's very happy to do whatever service for the devotees that he wants. He likes being in a very quiet place like this. You'll see when we go to the other places, like Radha Govinda temple, busy, 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 so many people coming, going, clatter, and sound amplification, and buzz, buzz, buzz. And this is very much to his liking, very much like Lokanath himself. Because of the packed schedule that we'll have this morning, I'm going to speak something about Lokanath and Radha Vinod. And we'll come back again and have his darshan again because he's so attractive. If you can recall, when we were at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrndavan, in the courtyard where Rupa Goswami's Bhajan Kutir and Samadhi is, way over to the side from the temple, way over on the other side is a Samadhi of Bhugarva Goswami. Bhugarva and Lokanath were contemporaries who came to Vrndavan before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived. We do not hear so much about Lokanath or Bhugarva in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there's a particular reason for that in the case of Lokanath. Lokanath was very much elder to many of the Vaishnavas, and particularly Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, when he was preparing to write Chaitanya Charitamrita, as he was requested to do so by the pujaris of the Govindaji temple, he went to each of the senior Vaishnavas and begged their permission or their blessings to carry out this task. And when he went to Lokanath, Lokanath gave his blessings on one condition, that he not mention his name. So Lokanath's name is not mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Ashish, if you can do a simultaneous translation, that's going to work. And if we do it like this, the recording is not going to work. So either simultaneous or after. Okay, let's do that. This gives us something of an idea of the mood of Lokanath. His mood, just like the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was one of complete humility. Complete humility. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that he was going to leave Navadvip, take sannyas, and leave, and his plan was to come to Vrndavan, he told Lokanath that you will not In advance of his sannyas, Chaitanya Bhagavat describes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu informed 5 individuals of his plan before carrying out his plan. Lokanath was one, and he informed him of his plan and said that he should go to Vrndavan in advance and make arrangements for him when he reaches there. So they were very confidential service. But Lokanath did not want to do that because he didn't want to bear a moment's separation from Lord Chaitanya. But he understood the gravity, the seriousness of Lord Chaitanya's request, and so he left. But before leaving Navadvip, he went to each and every one of the Vaishnavas requesting blessings. Fell at their feet, touched their feet, and requested blessings that he has some service to do to go to Vrndavan. Please give me your blessings. See the character of Lokanath. This, as the description of his life unfolds, you get a deeper and deeper sense of his personality. When he came to Vrndavan, there was nothing like we see. The places of Krishna's pastimes had been lost. There were no temples. There were no roads. There was nothing to give any kind of clear evidence of Krishna's pastimes. But Mahaprabhu had given this assignment to him, and so he came to Vrndavan, and he was simply living in the forests of Braja. Of course, the local Brijbasis, they knew where the forests were, and he traveled throughout all the forests of Vrndavan, waiting for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come. But we've heard this description, Mahaprabhu didn't come. When he accepted sannyas, his plan was to go immediately to Vrndavan. That was his intention. But by different arrangements and tricks of Lord Nityananda, instead he went to Shantipur to give his association one more time to all of his devotees in Navadvip. And at the house of Advaita Acarya, Mother Swami made the request, do not go to Vrndavan. You are all that I have left. My husband is gone, my other son has gone, my other children have died. You're all that I have left in this world. But now you've taken sannyas. If you go to Vrndavan, that too will be taken away. Better, if you would please do so, go to Jagannath Puri. Krishna is also there in Jagannath Puri in the form of Lord Jagannath. And there's so much more connection between Jagannath Puri. The devotees go there every year for Jagannath Rath Yatra. And when they go, then I can get some news of your well-being. And from time to time you may want to come and take bath in the Ganga, and so I will get to see you personally. So with that request of Mother Sachi, immediately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted her wish. He placed his strong desire subordinate to the desire of Mother Sachi. And so he went to Puri. And after being in Puri for some time, he made his South India tour. And as he was touring in South India, Lokanath in Vrndavan is waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally word came, oh, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has gone to South India. He didn't come to Vrndavan. The attachment of Lokanath for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so strong. He left Vrndavan by foot. He traveled all the way from Vrndavan to the tip of South India, searching for Lord Chaitanya. Imagine, how do you find somebody in all of South India? But he traveled, and when he reached South India, he heard that Lord Chaitanya had made his travels through South India, and he was on his return to Puri. So very swiftly, Lokanath went to Puri, only to find out Lord Chaitanya has left, heading for Vrndavan. So he quickly went to Vrndavan, and as he reached Vrndavan, he found, oh, Mahaprabhu was here for several months, and just the other day he left for Prayag. And so with just utter despondency, Lokanath, he was told, Mahaprabhu was looking for you, and he couldn't find you. He very much wanted to see you. So Lokanath decided the next morning he would go to Prayag and try to catch Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But he had a vision where Lord Chaitanya appeared before him and instructed him to remain in Vrndavan and to wait for Rupa and Sanatan, who were the embodiment of his compassion, his personal compassion, and take their association. How strong is the instruction of a master, the idea of a relationship where one is attached to another, particularly a spiritual relationship where there's a mood of loving service. The order of the master is life and soul. And it may sometimes be very hard to place my own desire completely subordinate to the desire of the master. But Mahaprabhu had given his instruction, so he had to stay. He wanted to go. He traveled all over India by foot to find him, in just a few days prior. We're going to break Ekadasi, so we're going to pass some little grain around so we can break Ekadasi at the proper time. It may be tough sometimes, because the main principle that most people operate with is this idea Bhaktisiddhanta called the dovetailing. I have my desire, and in the realm of devotional service there's some match between things that Krishna likes, so I do what I like and connect it with what Krishna likes. So dovetail, put together our desire, and somewhere out there is something like what Krishna desires, so it's very nice. But what happens when our desire is something 180 degrees diametrically opposite what Krishna wants? Then what do we do? The mood of devotion is immediately we subordinate our desire to Krishna's desire. Prabhupada describes this in Nectar of Devotion when he's describing the rasa of sakya, of servitorship, dasya. He gives as the example Krishna's son Pradyumna. And he says that when Pradyumna would desire something and Krishna would desire he not do that something, Pradyumna would not do that something. And if Pradyumna had a desire to not do something and Krishna indicated to do that something, he would do that something without hesitation. That's servitorship. And servitorship is at the basis, the foundation of transcendental rasa. So transcendental rasa of servitorship is Lord Chaitanya says stay and you want to go, so you stay. Lord Chaitanya says, go, you want to stay, so you go. The problem is most persons don't have a master. Anatta. There's no one that they're surrendered to, and so it's whatever the dictate of the mind says. I don't want to go here, I don't want to go here. I want to go there, I don't want to go there. And life is just this chaotic cacophony of voices from the mind, following this idea, that idea, trying to dovetail, but it really is just my desire. Therefore, Lokanath showed this mood of servitude toward Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he accepted his order and stayed. Now this very deity that we see on the altar suddenly appeared in a very mysterious way. When we went to Varsana, remember we were traveling down a road and we stopped on the way back at the village of Induleka. It was on our left or on our right coming back. Just before that, on the right going in, is the place where Lokanath made his residence. Vrndavan, in a place called by a kund called Kishori Kund. Very remote. At that time, very remote. Who knew where Varsana was? There was no big mandir up on top of the hill. But he liked the place so much, he made that his residence. And by providential arrangement, he had this desire that started to grow, very surprising desire for such a renunciate as Lokanath, that he wanted to worship a deity. Imagine living in the forest, a complete renunciate, having nothing, having a desire to worship a deity. And the desire became stronger and stronger and stronger. And he was very surprised. Where is this desire coming from? And the answer came very soon. One day a Brahmana appeared out of nowhere and came and presented a cloth bag to Lokanath and said, "Here, this is for you." And turned around and disappeared. He looked inside the bag and there was Radha. And he was thinking, whoa, what am I going to do? This is Krishna's appearing because I had this desire. He's reciprocating with that desire. It turns out Krishna wanted him to have that desire. Radha said, "I am Radha and I have come here because I want you to worship me. So please begin some worship." And Lokanath said, "But how can I do that? I don't have anything. I don't have any place to keep you. I don't have any place for myself even, so what to speak of keeping you? And what offerings can I make?" And Radha said again, "But I'm hungry. Find something and feed me. I'm hungry." So living in a forest, he went and found whatever roots and berries and whatever edibles he could find, made some simple offering and offered it to Radha. With whatever soft leaves he could find, he made a little bed for Radha to lay them down at night. And with other large leaves stitched together with little sticks, he made a fan and would fan them sing to them, just like in the spiritual world, just serving Krishna. Because in his spiritual identity, he's a very intimate Manjari, assistant of Radharani. And so his spiritual elevation was such that he just began performing those activities which he would do in the spiritual world. Living very austere life in the forest of Vrndavan. Then, just as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicated, Sanatana and Rupa Goswami came to Vrndavan. We know what the distance, because we did it by car, the distance between Vrndavan and Barsana. So Sanatana and Rupa Goswami, hearing about the glories of this wonderful associate, personal associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is living in Braj, so they went to see him, and they saw how simply he was living. And they invited him, please come and stay with us in Vrndavan, because it'll be much safer there for the deity than way off here. So Lokanath came, made his residence in the same area where the Gokulananda temple is, where we visited, and he worshipped Radha Vinod in that place. And that worship went on for a very long time. Another part of the Leela which was enacted by Lokanath was his accepting of Narottama Das Thakur. We described that when we visited that temple. Lokanath had this vow that he would not accept any disciples, but the extreme loving mood of humble service of Narottam Das Thakur, who was the son of a king, and Lokanath, considering himself to be this insignificant nobody, was saying to him, this is not possible. You're the son of a king. How can I be your spiritual master? Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, they're so elevated. You should seek their association for initiation. But Narottam was so moved by the unique qualities of Lokanath through his service in great humility, cleaning up the call of nature that Lokanath was depositing by the side of the Jamuna each day for a long period of time with his own hand, just cleaning, just so that the place would be very nice for Lokanath each day. Discovering that Narottam was doing this, it melted the heart of Lokanath, and he accepted this one disciple. And Narottam Das Thakur, Prabhupada said about Narottam Das Thakur that his songs are equivalent to scripture. And his spiritual master was Lokanath. And these deities of Radha Vinod are the deities of Lokanath Goswami. So he continued his bhajan in the same area, Radha Gokulananda temple area. His samadhi was placed nearby the temple, and these deities of Radha Vinod were brought from Vrndavan to Jaipur, along with the several other sets of deities that we'll be visiting today. Radha Govinda, we saw Radha Madhav yesterday, Radha Vinod, Radha Damodar, and Radha Gopinath. So it's about time for us to go take darshan of Radha Damodar. So the sequence will be Radha Damodar, then Radha Gopinath, and breakfast here. 9:30. Here. Yes? Okay. So from here to the Radha Damodar temple, how much time? Just around the corner? 5 minutes. So let me say something about Radha Govinda. When you are looking at the altar, you could see the Govindaji deity and Radharani, and right by Govinda's right side, there's a deity about this tall. That's Gaur Govinda deity that was personally arranged by Lord Chaitanya for Kashishwara Pandit to worship. We told this description, and then the Shalagram Shila that was personally worshipped by Rupa Goswami and Lalita and Vishaka. I'll try to describe this quickly. The Govindaji deity is one of the principal deities established by Vajranabh, and installed in that area where the Govindaji temple is called Yog Pith. There's 4 directions and 4, Dinabandhu calls it, places where Krishna's pastimes are coordinated for the day. And that's one of the places. Has that spiritual significance. Because from Vrindakund, which we didn't visit, that's another one of the places. Vrindadevi would coordinate and orchestrate the pastimes of Krishna day by day. The colors of the flowers and the ornaments that the devotees would wear, and who would visit who at which time, at which location. She coordinated the whole thing. So as many things were lost over the period of time, the Govindaji deity was lost. It's a very nice description. That Rupa Goswami was empowered. We heard this about Rupa Goswami several times during this yatra. He was specifically empowered by Lord Chaitanya to understand his heart and to carry out his instructions. He was empowered to carry out his instructions because he was fully surrendered to his instructions. But he was specially empowered. And one of the instructions was to establish the places of Krishna's pastimes as well as to write books. And one of the principal deities was not to be found. The Madanmohan deity had been found, but Govindaji had not been found. And so he was searching and searching and searching all of Braja. He even went into people's homes, home by home, like knocking on doors. Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? And the Mahants didn't know, and the elder Vaishnavas didn't know. Nobody knew where to find Govindaji. So this desire for sambhog, desire to find Govinda. So one day, with this very intense desire, like disappointment that he was unable to fulfill this instruction, one small cowherd boy came and saw Rupa Goswami looking so unhappy and asked, "Why are you looking this way? You look so disturbed." And he explained, because although it was a complete stranger, just a young boy, because of the charm and beauty and transcendental presence of, it was Krishna, that he just opened his heart and explained the whole thing, and the small boy said, there's no need to be in despair like this. I can tell you where Govindaji deity is. Up on top of that hill. And he pointed. There's a cow that comes every morning and stands over the same place and just releases her milk right into the soil. That's because she's performing Abhishek of Govinda. Come, I'll show you. And took his hand and took him right to the place where the cow would deposit his milk. And just as suddenly as the boy appeared, he disappeared. So Rupa Goswami could understand who that little boy was. Amazing. And so, because of his stature, Rupa Goswami simply informed the local people what had happened, and the next morning they very, very carefully began to dig, and the very place where the deity was found is just where the temple is presently. There's a little structure to the side where the deity, where the hole where the deity was, and you see how large is Govindaji. Very, very large. So big, just like when Madhavendra Puri showed everybody where Gopal was, the same kind of a ceremony, Abhishek and grand festival, and the installation of Radha Govinda, or excuse me, of Govinda took place. Then a rather longish narration could follow, but I'll shorten it because we've discussed it already. The son of Prataparudra Maharaj, the king of Utkal, wanted to have Radha by the side of Govinda and Madanmohan. So he produced those deities. We heard this yesterday. The Pujari of the Madanmohan deity had a dream where the Radha by his side was really Radha, but the other Radha, who was a little taller, was actually Lalita. Lalita is a little older and a little taller than Radha. So Radha, Madanmohan, and Lalita, leaving Govindaji without Radha. So the son of Prataparudra, Purushottam Jena, was really anxious to perform that service for Govinda, but there was no indication how it should be done. The indication came when one Brahmin in a part of his kingdom, who lived in a village called Radhapur, goes back several generations. Several generations, a Brahmin was worshipping a deity of Radha, and his state of spiritual elevation was so exalted that everyone in the whole countryside knew. So when he left his body, the king attended the funeral to honor this person, the Brahmana, and it was brought to the king's attention, there's no one to continue the worship of Radha. So the king brought the deity of Radha and placed the deity of Radha in Jagannath temple. And over a period of years, persons had forgotten that this is Radha and were worshipping her as Lakshmi. So the king had a dream, Purushottam Jena had a dream in which Radha appeared and said, I'm actually Radha, I'm not Lakshmi. And I want to go and be by the side of Govinda. can you make that arrangement? So he was very happy, transcendentally happy. And the Radha that we see by the side of Govindaji is that same deity. That deity that was worshipped, the whole narration is the deity of Radha that was worshipped by this Brahmin originally came from Jaipur. And then, from Vrndavan. Came from Vrndavan, went to Utkal, ended up in Jagannath temple and came back by the side of Govinda in Vrndavan. And so that Radha and Govinda, then Gaur Govinda, just like Prabhupada named one of his disciples, Gaur Govinda. When Rupa Goswami found Govindaji, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was still present. So he sent him a message through a Brahmin messenger indicating the good news that Govinda has been found. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu received that messenger and heard the news, he was in Gambhira and he was so happy to receive this news. Rupa Goswami, you have fulfilled all of my desires. And he called his two godbrothers, as you may know from Chaitanya Charitamrita. His two persons were sent by Ishwara Puri, who were Ishwara Puri's disciples. These two disciples were Govinda and Kashishwara Pandit. And when they were sent by Ishwara Puri, Lord Chaitanya was disturbed. How can I accept service from a godbrother? And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya intervened and said, when the order of the spiritual master is given, it is very strong. It must be followed. So there's this etiquette. One should not accept service from one's godbrother. There's a higher principle, and the higher principle above all these other principles is the order of the spiritual master is to be followed. Lord Chaitanya accepted that Kashishwara and Govinda would serve him. And they served him in very intimate, personal ways. When this news of Govindaji being discovered, he called the Kashishwara and instructed Kashishwara to come to Vrndavan and worship, assist Rupa Goswami, worship the deity. So here we go again, an instruction that one doesn't want to follow. He didn't want to leave Lord Chaitanya's association. Lord Chaitanya is his life and soul. So he pleaded with Lord Chaitanya, how can I go? How can I leave you without your association? What is my life? So knowing the mood of Kashishwara Pandit, Lord Chaitanya arranged, during his lifetime, he arranged for a deity of himself, called the deity Gaur Govinda, entrusted the deity to Kashishwara, and said, you take this deity with you, and whenever you're worshipping this deity, you will see me. So Kashishwara came to Vrndavan, along with his Gaur Govinda deity, and we'll go back to the temple and we'll have darshan again by Govinda's right foot, or between Govinda and the Shalagram Shila, large Shalagram Shila. There's a deity about this tall, Gaur Govinda. And that's the altar of Radha Govinda. And how powerful is Govindaji? Have you seen any temple anywhere in the world where so many people come for Mangal Arati at 5 o'clock in the morning? So powerful, so merciful. The deity of Govinda, Radha Govinda, is the deity that presides over the activities of devotional service. Madanmohan is establishing one's relationship or knowledge of the relationship of all things with their source of emanation, the Supreme. And Radha Govinda is the activities of devotion. He presides over drawing us closer and closer to Him through the activities of devotion. At this temple only, so far, where we've attended Mangal Arati at least, attended Kirtan, it's not just banging of gongs, it's singing of His name. And so many different choruses of people singing different songs. They even took the classic song and took Om Jaya Jagadisha Hare and made it Om Govinda Ji Hare, Hare, according to their mentality. But devotional service and advancing and progressing through the purification of heart through the medium of devotional service. Just two quick things and then we'll go, but important things. How do you approach Govinda? You can't approach Krishna directly. You approach Krishna through Radha. But how do you approach Radha? We say Radhe, Radhe, but what qualification do we have to approach Radha? But the intimate associate, Lalita Devi, by her side, through Lalita we approach Radha, who approaches Krishna. But how do we approach Lalita? What qualification do we have to approach Lalita? This is what happened in the Shyamananda pastime, where he found the ankle bell, the ankle ornament, and the kunj that he was cleaning. And it was Lalita who came to retrieve the ankle ornament. It was Lalita who transported him to the spiritual world before Srimati Radharani. So how do we approach Lalita? We certainly need humble service, as Shyamananda was doing. And the instructor of that process of humble service is Rupa Goswami. In Lord Chaitanya's Leela, it's Rupa Goswami. So we're Rupanugas. And in Krishna Leela, Rupa Goswami is Sri Rupa Manjari, an intimate associate and servant of Lalita, who serves Radha in very confidential ways, who serves Krishna. And Rupa Goswami was the one who manifested Govindaji, again to our vision. So we just follow very carefully Rupa Goswami's teachings. And try to attract the pleasure. Rupa Goswami, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, as the Vaishnava song describes. The lotus feet of Rupa Goswami are everything. The instructions of Rupa Goswami take us to Rupa Goswami's lotus feet. The process of devotional service is to be executed in that way, following very carefully Rupa Goswami's teachings, and just see how powerful. Same at the Madanmohan temple. When it was Arti time, each time, so many people came from all over the place, streaming, just like we saw people coming by foot, coming to the Mangal Arti. The center of the life of Karouli is Madanmohan. The center of life of Jaipur is Govindaji, and these other temples. And consider the devotion of Jai Singh. What was his concern? His concern was to serve Govinda, and because his function is that of Kshatriya, his service was to protect. So he brought Govindaji and the other deities here for safety. And now see what was the result of that service. The whole city of Jaipur is Govindaized. Just from service. His duty was that of king, and now by serving nicely, so each of us, we have our capacity or propensity for service, and if we serve appropriately the deity and the Lord and His holy name and His transcendental teachings of how to render devotional service as given to us by Rupa Goswami, the best benefit goes to everybody. This is proof. No, the whole city of Jaipur is still going its modern way. We saw plenty of it last night on the way back from the temple. But the spiritual sustenance is found in the teachings and the worship and the holy name and the service to the Vaishnavas. And that sanctifies this place as a place of pilgrimage for which we've come. So we'll try to go together and go quickly to the Radha Damodar temple. Radha Damodar, Radha Gopinath, and then back here for breakfast.